All right, so this video is going to help you do a nice review of how to find the roots of a quadratic with factoring. Before we get started with that though, I'm going to ask that you try to find as many factor pairs as possible for the numbers 24, 72, and -16. So to help you out, I've listed out 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. Those will all multiply to +16. But also, I could have listed -1 with -16. That will also make 16. -2, -8, that will also make, +16. -4 and -4 also would have listed 16. So go ahead and pause the video just in some scratch paper in your notebook or maybe on the side of the sheet. Go ahead and list all the factor pairs for 24, 72, and -16. Okay, so you're going to try all three of those. Pause the video once you're ready to check answers. Seriously, go try it on your own. So hopefully you found 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6, or we could have listed everything negative makes a positive, right? So those are another 4 pairs that you could have used. 72, all of these different pairs, okay, come out nicely, and then all of those could be double negatives. For -16, things are a little more interesting because, yeah, 1 and -16, or we could have had -1 and +16. So you got to be careful there about the positives and negatives. All right, so hopefully you remember factoring a little bit. Factoring to find the roots is going to be best when we have your quadratic that's in standard form. Standard form because we'll be able to figure out A, B, and C nice and easily. So this example is going to be when we have a leading coefficient of 1, which means our A value is 1. This way is sometimes known, it's not really a guess and check method, but some students have a guess and check method. We're going to talk about how to actually go through and find exactly the numbers you're looking for. So when we're looking to factor, we're looking to try to find our roots, right? And our roots are going to be where our graph crosses over the x-axis. So finding a pair of numbers that multiply to A times C. Well, for me, A is 1 and C is -4. So 1 times -4, I'd be looking for numbers that multiply to -4. So that could be anything of these. But then I also need my two numbers, whatever those two things are, to add to -3. So -1 times 4 gets me -4, and -1 plus 4 gets me 3. So I'm close, but not quite. 1 times -4 gets me my -4 that I need here. And when I add, I get -3. That's my winner. -2 times 2 gets me my -4, but -2 plus 2 gets me 0. So this is going to be my factor set that I want. And so what I would then do is I could factor this into x plus 1 and x minus 4. Set that equal to 0, in which case I would get x plus 1 equals 0 and x minus 4 equals 0. So x would be equal to -1 and x would be equal to 4, which is what our roots are right here. All right, so solving a quadratic by factoring. Sometimes our quadratic doesn't quite start in standard form. So write down your equation, right? Yours is already typed for you. Then it says to write in standard form. So we're going to write into x squared minus 4x minus 45 is equal to 0. So we have everything in standard form. I'm going to be looking for numbers that multiply to 1 times -45 and then add to -4. Well, some numbers that multiply to -45 would be 9 and 5. 1 negative, 1 positive, or maybe +9 and -5. This one's going to add me to -4. So I'm going to choose to factor this into x minus 9 and x plus 5. So now I have x minus, don't need that parentheses, x minus 9 equals 0, or x plus 5 equals 0. Which means that x equals 9 or x equals -5. Thus, our solutions are x equals 9 and x equals -5. This zero product property is in your notes. A times B equals 0. If that's true, then either A had to have been 0 or B had to have been 0. And so that's what we're doing in this line right here, where we take our factors right? This is like having A, this is like having B equal to 0. All right, so keeping that in mind, I want you to try to solve these two by factoring. Go ahead and try on your own and then pause the video. Sorry, pause the video, try on your own, and then come back when you're ready to compare. All right, so hopefully you paused the video and you tried on your own. Let's talk through them a little bit. All right, so I'm looking for things that multiplied to 10, because I moved the 10 to the other side. I have to start in standard form. So things that multiply to 10 but add to 7, well, that's going to be positive 5 and positive 2. So I factored, set each of the pieces equal to 0 because of that zero product property, and I end up with these two roots or x-intercepts. Second one, already in standard form, which is good. I need to then multiply to 15 and add to, multiply to 1 times 15 and add to 8. So 5 and 3 were my winning numbers. I go ahead and factor, and I end up with x equals -5 and x equals -3. All right, so this gets a little bit trickier because the difference here is now I have an a value that's not 1. A is going to be equal to 3, B is equal to -2, and C is equal to -5. So this time I'm still going to start the same way. I want to look for numbers that multiply to A times C. So I want to multiply 3 times -5 is -15. I still want to add to -2, the B term. But now this time it's not as straightforward as just finding the numbers and putting them in the factor sets. Now we actually need to split the middle term into those factors. So when we check by distributing our answers back, we make sure that we get everything to add together nicely to that middle term. Okay, so multiplying to -15 and adding to -2, I'm going to say 5 and 3 are my winners, and I want -5 and +3. Okay, and the reason I know that is because -5 plus +3 gets me the -2 that I was looking for. So when I talk about splitting the middle term, what I'm doing is I'm going to rewrite this. 3x squared and the -5 equal to 0, those all stay as they are because those aren't the middle term. The middle term was this -2x. So instead of calling this -2x, I'm going to use these numbers. I'm going to call this -5x plus 3x. So what I've done is I took my middle term and I've split it based on the two numbers that I picked. Okay? Now I'm going to factor. This time when I factor, I'm going to group and look for a GCF. So out of this purple set, hopefully you notice that they both have an x. So I'm going to take an x out. I'd be left with a 3x minus 5. Out of this green set, all they share is a 1. That's it. And I'm left with a 3x minus 5. That's the only thing they have in common is a 1. That's not that interesting. Okay, so now what I want you to look at in this blue set, and we'll go yellow, even though yellow is not the best color. The blue and the yellow, what they have in common is a 3x minus, come on, smartboard. My notebook's not working. 3x minus 5. Oh, come on. There we go. A 3x minus 5. And when I take a 3x minus 5 out of here, I'm left with x. When I take a 3x minus 5 out of here, I'm left with a plus 1. Well, now I can use my zero product property. 3x minus 5 is equal to 0, or x plus 1 is equal to 0. So x is equal to 5/3, or x is equal to -1. I can write those as my zeros, or my x-intercepts in this case, for where I'm going to cross that x-axis. Okay, so again, you want to do the split the middle when you have a leading coefficient that is not 1. Okay? So let's jump down here. Let's try these two practice problems. All right, I want you to try on your own first because this is something you've done before. And then if you're stuck, you can unpause the video and come back, or you can just unpause the video when you're ready to check your answers. Go ahead and pause now. All right, so what's really important here is that this splitting the middle term works for something if it has a leading coefficient that's not 1, but it also works if your leading coefficient was 1. So for practice number 2, you might have been like, Ms. Schwartz, we literally just did this problem and I already know the answers. And you're right. I just wanted to show you that you could do this using split the middle if you wanted. So let's look at example 1 first, this one over here. I need to multiply to negative 18, which I did here, and add to positive 3. So I came up with 6 times negative 3 gives me negative 18, and 6 plus negative 3 gets me 3. So I split the middle term into 6x and negative 3x. Then I grouped the things in purple, factored out a 2x, grouped the things in green, factored out a negative 3. Now what I notice is x plus 3 is in both this blue term and this yellow term. So I can factor that out, and I'm left with 2x minus 3, which is what goes here. Set those each equal to 0 using the zero product property. Okay? The next one then, I'm looking for things that multiply to 1 times 15, which is 15, and add to 8. 5 and 3 are what we came up with in the other example, and we're totally right. We could have just done it the easy way, but split the middle will always work. So if you like a system that always works for every factoring, then split the middle, that's totally fine. You're just undoing your foiling, which is great. So I bring these down, x squared plus 5x plus 3x plus 15. Group these together, all they have in common is an x. Group these together, they have in common a 3. Now the blue and the yellow have in common this x plus 5. So I can take that out, and I'm left with x plus 3. So you can see where those numbers are coming from, and I get the same answers that I had before. All right, I'm going to take you through one more of the split the middle, going step by step. Hopefully I'll get it in before the video. So on your practice worksheet that hopefully we passed out to you at some point, if not, you should pick one up from your teacher. Let's talk about number 8. I need to multiply to 4 and add to negative 5. So that's going to be negative 1 and negative 4, which will lead me to negative 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this equation and I'm going to split the middle term. 2r squared, and I leave the plus 2 equal to 0. These numbers come down into the middle, so minus r and minus 4r. Then I'm going to group, take out the r, I'm left with 2r minus 1. If this is moving too fast for you, you can always come back and rewatch the video. You can listen first and then maybe write stuff down later. Here, I'm going to take out a negative 2 because I don't really like this negative 4r business. So this becomes 2r, and now this becomes minus 1. And the reason I do that also is because I want this blue set and this yellow set to have something in common. So now what they have in common is a 2r minus 1, and I'm left with r minus 2. And from there I can use the zero product property. 2r minus 1 equals 0, and r minus 2 equals 0. So r is going to be equal to 1/2, and r is going to be equal to 2. We know there's not a ton of room on this factoring worksheet, so you can use the back of it. You could use some notebook paper. This is all just some really good practice. I strongly suggest you do the ones that have a number other than 1 in the front, okay, with that split the middle term. That will be super helpful for you. All right, that's it. Make sure that you understand factoring. We're going to go over it a little bit more, but this is a review from your Algebra 1 days, so hopefully it's starting to come back to you. And of course, you can always watch the classic Teach Me How to Factor if you need to.